Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. Acsom, Rabani. It's Monday afternoon, and I'll just say to you before we went live, I'm quite relaxed with where we are as a football club, as a team, and there is no panic. There is no panic at Acsom headquarters, but that's not what I've been seeing on the socials. That's not what I've been seeing on the WhatsApp groups. There seems to be quite a lot of panic. Where are you after a bit of a stalemate at the weekend against Dundee United?
Yeah, the socials are probably best to be avoided on days like yesterday. I think it's important to have balance. I think language is important, tone is important, balance and perspective is important. You know, it's what we call out for from our journalists, and we often slate them when we see that there isn't a balance in their reporting or in their narrative, which is the buzzword these days. And then just one look on social media from our own fans yesterday, I think, and I say this, and it works on both ends of the spectrum. I think here's my kind of take on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with those that are concerned after yesterday, not just yesterday in isolation. I think in terms of our run of form or the slight regression in recent weeks. So I don't think that people should be shut down for raising those concerns. Now, obviously, today we'll kind of discuss a bit of everything. And again, like I say, I think balance is important because I don't think there's anything wrong with being concerned and raising those points and saying where we feel that the performances have slipped, and I think that's something that we do need to discuss. But on the other hand, I don't think it merits the absolute panic and some extreme views about the team's a shambles right now. I've seen some comments. I put something out on X yesterday, and some of the responses to that, most were fine, but you get some that are just absolutely slating the team and everything, and slating the manager. And I think you have to try and take everything, looking at zoom out and look at the broader, bigger picture, and not just one game in isolation. So I think there's a lot to kind of discuss. I'm not panicked, but I'm not maybe as chill as you are in terms of totally relaxed, because I remember it was a game last season, 0-0, Hibs, Easter Road, and I think it was one of our kind of first drop points. We drew it home to St Johnstone earlier in the season, but 0-0 at Hibs, and everyone kind of goes, "Oh, it's a one-off game." I think we were still, I can't remember exactly how many points clear at that point, but we were ahead. But it just slightly kind of got people concerned, and I think after that we seen that we continued to play poorly, and then that led into the kind of November period where we dropped more points. So the hope is that it isn't a pattern beginning to emerge in terms of the performances. Look, we'll talk about it a bit more, obviously, but I would say I'm not panicking, but I'm a wee bit concerned at the kind of last 3 or 4 games, and it's the same kind of concerns I've had in each of those games.
You know, I've been going back on the fixtures and thinking to myself, right, this discussion around the drop of form, I reckon if we go back to Hampden Park, where we destroy Aberdeen 6-0, Aberdeen at that point sitting second in the table, we take them in the semi-final of the Cup and we destroy them. 2nd of November, that's all it was, 2nd of November. Yeah. And yeah, that followed a number of victories. It followed the draw against Atalanta, for example. But if we take it back to the 6-0, and then we follow that up, Acsom, with the RB Leipzig victory, 3-1 at home, where we saw a style of football that had us all excited. All you need to do is listen to the Acsom post-match, and then maybe for a week or two after that, we're talking about that as being almost like a pivotal moment, really, in the development of this team under Brendan Rodgers. And then since then, we beat Kilmarnock away, we beat Hearts away. People are disappointed, I guess, at the Club Brugge game, 1 each. I think it was an opportunity missed for Celtic, that particular game. We destroyed Ross County 5-0. It was a game at half-time where we were thinking we could score 10. We scraped past Aberdeen. We beat Hibs convincingly, although we weren't great and we looked pretty poor at the back. Then we draw away against Dinamo Zagreb. We are, again, at a fixture that we thought we might have won. And then there's the cup final. And the cup final is what it is. It was 3 each, and we beat them on penalties, and it takes a lot out of us. So I think that run has been really patchy. I think within that run of games, we've seen the excellence of the 6-0 and the Leipzig victory. And that had us up here. That was like the high point of the season, I think, that couple of games.
Yeah.
And then since then, winning games when we're not playing well, dominating possession, not doing much with it, but still getting through it. And then a couple of disappointing draws, which is bizarre that we can talk about disappointing draws in the Champions League.
Yeah.
But in amongst that, again, we win the Cup as well. And then yesterday, I likened yesterday, Acsom, to Pittodrie. I think that there was so many similarities between the Pittodrie performance and the Tannadice performance. I think that the weather played its part. Against Aberdeen, the winds were 60 mile an hour. Against Dundee United, they were 55 mile an hour. It does affect both teams. No great team games of football to watch. And the only difference, if we're talking about margins at the end of the season, is that wee bit of magic by Rio against Aberdeen. That tiny wee bit of magic, and that wasn't there yesterday. There was a couple of opportunities. There was a moment actually where Kyogo played a through ball to Ida, and it was a yard ahead of him, just a yard in front of him. And when you watch that move back, Acsom, if Ida starts his run that wee bit early, because he's a wee bit slow to actually start his run, and then you look at the Kyogo chance that obviously was laid on by Ida. That's the real moment. That's the moment where you score the goal, you get down the road with 3 points. And, we're probably still talking about some slight concerns about the form, Acsom, but it's not as really as much in a panic mode. And then what then happens, and this is quite separate, I think. Separate to that is the dreaded narrative, this narrative that the gap is closing, etc., etc. Well, mathematically, yes, the gap at the top of the league closed slightly at the weekend, but in terms of the gap, as a concept between the two clubs, or as a concept between a title race, I think that's what I'm more calm about, Acsom. I think that has been overplayed quite a bit.
Yeah, look, ultimately, we're still well ahead, 9 points clear. We're in a brilliant position. We came on after the Aberdeen game. We came on after the cup final, and I think it helps, obviously, when you end up getting the results. You can gloss over the performance. You can look at the weather conditions. You can look at it being a cup final. Zagreb, you can look at it in isolation again, a Champions League point away from home. So in isolation, all those results have been great or good. So we can almost ignore the performance as such and be like, right, it's part of this. And I remember at the end of last week's show on the Monday, I kind of highlighted how great a kind of period in first half of the season it's been, and how we should look at all the positives. But obviously, naturally, with game on game, if I still see the same kind of patterns of performance, then it does become a bit of a concern in terms of, like, you're right, the conditions yesterday were brutal. Pittodrie the same. We also had a lot of players out. It's not just any players. You've got two of your best performers this season in Kuhn and Johnston down the right hand side, and then your kind of normal centre back pairing. So then we don't have the depth on the bench to bring on and change the game. So there's a lot of different factors, which, like you said, makes me feel that, what, in the long run, I'm not overly concerned. We've got a massive game coming up, obviously. On that massive 3 games, I don't want the gap to get reduced any going into that Ibrox game. And what it does do is it gives them a bit of hope and breathes a bit of life into. But we've seen all this before. That's what they like to do. They jump on this, feeling, and they suddenly have a bit of hope again, and then they play us and we shut it down. It's it's the kind of same old cycle. But if we're just focusing on Celtic alone, my concern, Paul John, would be that even in those games, if we ignore the weather conditions or all that, I still feel that we're playing a lot slower now than we were. Not a lot slower, but we're playing slower. We're not playing with that same speed and intensity right from the off that we were doing, like you said, in those kind of peak part of the season, Leipzig, Aberdeen, those kind of games. And I feel like that's probably since the Dynamo Zagreb game, especially. It looked like we were playing a lot more cautious, and we all said it that night. Then last week in the cup final, I just felt we weren't playing with the same speed. We ended up getting the cup, so it's fine. And then that kind of followed on yesterday as well. I just felt there wasn't the same urgency until maybe the last 5 or 6 minutes. So it's something that I would like us to address in these next couple of home games, and I'm hoping that they can turn into more of the kind of performances that we've seen earlier on in the season.
Yeah, because there were blistering performances. The ones we're talking about, Leipzig, Aberdeen, there were others as well. We blew Rangers away in the first fixture of the season. And I think that when you're talking about, I totally agree with that. We were far slower yesterday in our play. And what then happens is, obviously, the team that you're playing, who are already set up to play narrow defensively, get plenty of men behind the ball, they lap it up. Acsom, because they're not facing their goal. I always go on about this. Get the other team to face their goal, and the way that we have done that is by getting the ball to our wingers quickly. And how have we done it? Well, you've already mentioned that we've had a system down the right-hand side that's worked really, really well. And it's not just AJ and Kuhn. Let's not forget Engels' part in that. And we'll come on to Engels. We'll come on to the conversation about him and the midfield as a whole. But he was a part of this fluid movement down the right-hand side. How many moves did we make down there and we created chances and we scored goals? So that's something we need to tap back into. That's difficult when two of the elements are injured and the other element isn't starting. So that you can almost remove that threat straight off the bat. The other part of that, I think, was the quick passing of the centre halves. And obviously something happened in the League Cup final where Trusty was hooked. He was hooked at half-time. By the way, Brendan Rodgers made the right decision because we win the game. Bizarrely enough, certain people say that we didn't win the game, we drew the game.
Yeah. It's like the 3-3 win at Ibrox last season, wasn't it?
Oh, see the mental rewiring of your brain to say that we didn't win the cup. It's like, but you never won the game. It was a 3-3 draw. That's nuts, right? We won the game on penalties. So, Brendan Rodgers seen something that he wasn't happy with in relation to the way that we were using the ball from the central defensive areas. And then since then, obviously, we've had a completely different partnership at the weekend. So I think that's a problem because we constantly say, get the ball into the pockets of space for Maeda and Kuhn. And Schmeichel is brilliant at that as well. He's done that so often. But yesterday, didn't see much of that. Most of the passing that came, and by the way, credit to Stephen Welsh, most of the passing that came from the centre halves were the dinks over the top that can be effective, and we created a few chances. There was one defence splitting pass to Yang, but Yang is no Kuhn, and we'll come to that as well. So I think you're right. It was slow, but a big part of that for me, Acsom, is the personnel. The personnel who make it fast weren't playing yesterday, were they?
Yeah. Well, yeah, normally I would say you're right. I think that kind of started last week, though, that it slowed down even just from the centre-backs even last week. So it was a continue. I think when everyone's seen the lineup yesterday, a lot of the concerns would have been defensively because you're changing three of your usual back four. Whereas I actually thought defensively we were fine yesterday. I don't think that's where the problems lay. And some people may think that the build-up was too slow, but I actually didn't think so. I didn't think that it was too slow from the centre-backs. I thought Welsh and Scales got it to the midfield quick enough, but it was from there on after that I felt we struggled. Because we spoke about it at length, the drop off in the wide areas. We just don't have that consistency when Kuhn's not playing in terms of from Yang or Palmer, and I think that's glaringly obvious now, and especially with Jamesy out for a while, and we don't know how long Kuhn's going to be out. It really highlights what all of us have been saying probably since his transfer window closed in September, that we still maybe light in those wide areas. So January's coming at a good time, I think, in that sense. And also, what it highlights to me is as good as our midfield is, and as strong as we've been praising it all season for the different options, I feel it lacks a certain profile of player. That you look at maybe 2 seasons ago, we had Tom Rogic, Aaron Moy, and Matt O'Reilly. 3 creative players in that midfield who can unlock a defence. Now we're solely relying on Rio Hotati, who we've seen is, hit and miss what we're going to get from him. But other than that, the profile of our midfielders don't seem to have that. So I feel like and it's happened with Jim Goodwin's sides before. I remember he got a 0-0 draw with a St Mirren, injury ravaged team a couple of years ago against Ange. Similar kind of game. He did it with Aberdeen, which I think ultimately nearly cost him his job not long after, where he set up really defensively, but Callum McGregor managed to score a late goal. We won 1-0. So it was no surprise what we were going to be faced with yesterday. And we just didn't have an answer to unlock that defence. Now, look, we missed a couple of chances, but I seen even the XG showed it was really low. We didn't create an awful lot. And I do feel that kind of creative midfielder. Now, I know Luke McCowan could be that, and there's been talk that he should be playing more because he's got a bit more of creativity in him. But the rest of them, I feel that's an area we're lacked. We've lost, like I say, three of those in the last 2 years in Rogic, Moy, and Matt O'Reilly, who could all take the ball in the half turn, unlock, play a through ball, create something out of nowhere. I feel like when you've not got that, then we really struggle at times.
You know, and this might be controversial to a point, Asim. I think Turnbull was in that category, although not as effective as the three guys you've mentioned.
He tried it, but he
Yeah,
wasn't. You're right, he wasn't as effective with it.
you give him the ball 25 yards out, he's turning and striking. Now, by the way, Luke McCowan did try that a couple of times, and I want to talk about his performance. I was looking at some of the interesting data in and around the amount of times he lost the ball, and that will definitely flag up to Rodgers because he hates the fact that we're not tidy enough sometimes with the ball. If you lose the ball, the chances are you're going to get hooked, and he did. He got hooked. The Rio Atati one, absolutely, yeah, he is the most creative midfielder we've got, Asim, but he's not consistent.
Yeah,
He really isn't consistent. Now, I was looking through the usual big shout out to the Celtic News Now guys. They do a fantastic job with their site. And I was looking through to try and find out if there was any reaction from anybody at the game in relation, because I've seen a couple of comments about Rio taking off his jersey. Now, this is what happens, Asim. Every single nuance of every single player will be scrutinised because we never won the game.
yeah,
And I just read it at the time that, you know, and I mentioned this yesterday after the game, Rio puts me in mind in terms of his work rate to Stan Petrov, whereby every time he comes off the park, he's done. He's absolutely done in. He's soaking in sweat. And I think he just took a layer off. I think he took a layer off because he's knackered and he's hot, right? Even though it was a cold, blustery day, he's been putting in the hard yards. But I think, you know, someone shouted something at him, you know, in relation to that. And he might have, and I don't mean responded as in a gesture, he heard the shout. And I didn't read anything into it. But yesterday, some of the comments were saying that, you know, hopefully that's you making your way out of the club in January and all this kind of stuff. And this is what I'm talking about in relation to an overreaction. Rio Atati is one of the most skillful and talented players that we've got at the football club. I think the frustration for me over the period of time that he's been at the club is the inconsistency. But it's not a new phenomenon. He's been inconsistent since he joined Celtic. And I remember in the early days, people were going on about the fact that it took him a while actually to get to that senior level. He never played a lot of football prior to coming to Celtic, and then he's expected to play 40 and 50 games a season.
Yeah.
And I think he struggled with that initially. By this stage, I would have hoped that he would have found a consistency level, but he hasn't. And I think one of the biggest focuses from yesterday's game will be, right, what's our strongest midfield right now? Because up until now, we have been so, you know, when we're looking at the strongest parts of the team, we've been so focused on the midfield, saying, you know, we don't have an issue in the midfield. You know, you roll the dice on that. I think it's now a case of looking at that and saying, we do need more creativity in that midfield. Where is Engels in the great scheme of things? Where's McCowan after yesterday's performance? And of course, where's Rio Atati? The best midfielder beyond McGregor, who obviously has chipped him in an incredible amount of goals by his standards, is Paulo Bernardo, who's not starting a lot of games. So that's a conversation that we're going to have as we move on. I'm going to start with Kuhn, though, because you brought Nicholas Kuhn up, and I was really disappointed not only that he didn't make the starting 11, but he wasn't in the squad due to injury. So his was not down to the illness that ravaged the squad. He's injured against Rangers. Now, all the chat, Asim, in the aftermath of that Rangers game, all the chat was on the Scales non-penalty award, right? That was all the focus. Everybody's looking at that. And we pointed out, one of the shows last week was, what about these three decisions that didn't go for Celtic? And one of them was the tackle on Kuhn. Now, I'm not saying for a moment, because it's not been confirmed, that specific tackle caused the injury. It certainly wouldn't have helped. And there was a few other challenges during the game, Asim, that were not punished on Nicholas Kuhn. And of course, he's now missed training all week and he's missed the game. So I'm going to go back to that Rangers game and say, well, you know, all the focus seemed to be on one decision. There were other decisions that were missed. And we're actually now suffering the fact that Nicholas Kuhn is injured. And I'm guessing he was injured in the Rangers game, Asim. Nothing made of it at the time.
No, like the meltdown was hilarious for a few days, but I found after a few days it was still getting talked about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All the chat was about that, how they were hard done by, how they played so well, and you know, I found it really quite frustrating by the end of it. I was tempted to phone into Super Scoreboard one day and just be like, "What game were you watching?" Because as much as Celtic weren't at their best, the praise that they were giving Rangers as if they played a brilliant game. It was a 3-3 pretty even game that I still felt we shaded, and that's us playing way off it. And is that them at their best? Well, again, that bodes well for us, doesn't it, going forward? But like I said earlier, if that's if this is what they continue to do, they go through this same cycle, and if they want to deflect from their own failings, deflect from the fact that their manager in 6 attempts hasn't been able to beat us, deflect from the fact they're 9 points behind us, and focus solely on this decision, then so be it. Because again, it works out better for us, because that's the difference. You look at us, we dropped points yesterday, and we look inwards. We look at where we can be better. We look at there's all this. Some may say too much scrutiny, too much analysis, and there's an argument for that as well. But I think that's the difference. There's a winning mentality, a winning culture within the club and within the fan base that, when we see things that are a wee bit off, we want to tackle it, we want to address it. And I think that will be the same with the manager. I thought his interview after was fairly calm. He didn't go overboard, but he doesn't need to. It's not like this time last season where he was trying to find answers as well, where he was saying it wasn't a surprise when we lost to Hearts, and he said after the St Johnstone game it was the angriest he's been. It's different this season. We've had a really good start. And I spoke about it last week that December period is about just getting the games ticked off. And while we were doing that, it's fine. Obviously, dropped points yesterday, so I hope we see an upturn in performance now in the next 2 home games. But yeah, Nicholas Kuhn is vital to that. I do think you make a good point. It's disappointing that he was missing, and by all accounts, it's not clear whether he's going to be back for the next game. I think Roger says he'll need to look at it today. It was his knee, I think, that was bothering him. So hopefully he's back, because he's vital to our creativity. As you said, that midfield seems to be lacking it. I think we've got a good midfield, but we're lacking that really creative spark, especially when Rio's off it. So then you're solely relying on Kuhn at times. For all Maeda's qualities, he's not creative. He can't make something happen out of nowhere. Well, I say that after last week he can, but you know what I mean in terms of like trickery and skill. Kuhn is your man. Yang, we hope, could do it, but again, yesterday these are the opportunities where you hope. Yang's done not bad in the last few weeks coming off the bench, and you're right, this is your chance to start a game and really show what you're made of. And he wasn't getting involved enough first half. Then when he does have a chance to create, he throws a ball across the box. It should have been better. So I think we've seen enough now of Yang and Palma that they're just not reliable to come in and rotate the way we can in other positions. I don't think the wide areas is an area we can get away with rotation and keeping up that same level of quality. So yeah, January's coming at a good time, and I hear a certain Portuguese guy maybe leaving a certain French team soon.
Look at that. As if by magic, David Cooper comes in. Listen, the Nicholas Kuhn chat does lead us on to the wider issue around the wings, Acsom. And the big thing is we've ran for a long time with a huge squad, and so many players not contributing. And when Brendan Rodgers came in, you knew you just have to look at the squads that he's had and built previously at his previous clubs, including Celtic. That's really not what he does. He doesn't like to run with 30 players, for example. So he likes a much tighter core group where everybody within that group is going to contribute. And when they're contributing, you're actually contributing and you're fighting for the jersey. You're not just a bit part player, like a couple of the guys that you've mentioned. And it comes to that point where you're looking at something I said at the weekend before the game. I'll bring this back up about Jota because I want to get a sense of whether or not we can talk seriously about something like that. See that, when we move into January. But when we're talking about Yang and Palmer, so you're looking at that starting 11 coming through at the weekend there, and Yang's in the starting 11, Palmer's on the bench, and you're simply asking yourself, right, are they up to that standard where they're going to contribute to a win today? Are they going to be the person at 60 minutes into the game where if it's a stalemate, and I think we said this before the game and it turned out to be true, that one or the other are going to make a difference? Well, the answer is no.
No.
Simple as that. And when we brought it up before the game, it was mentioned in the comments that, you know what, you need to give him a chance. You need to give Yang a chance. And what I pointed out at that stage, Acsom, is the fact that Yang has played more games of football for Celtic than Kuhn. He has had more appearances for Celtic than Kuhn. Now, Kuhn has made an impact and Yang hasn't. And they're similar age profiles. It's not as though, oh, he's just a kid, give him time, etc.
Yeah.
He's been at the football club now for a couple of seasons, and he's not, well, 18 months, and he's not made any kind of impact.
No.
And what I was hearing, but he looked busy. Came on against Bruges, looked busy for 10 minutes. He looked busy. Is that the prerequisite for a winger? I could look busy, right?
Yeah.
I don't see it. At the weekend, he needs to take that opportunity. He needs to take that ball from Stephen Welsh. Very good ball that it was. And he needs to find a man. He needs to find a man or do what Kuhn likes to do and come inside and actually get a shot in. He didn't do any of that. And then he swapped for Palmer. And why is Yang starting? Why is he swapped for Palmer? It's all we have. This is the thing. It's all we have. We've got 2 injuries, and this is what we are now looking at. So,
but isn't this what we worried about?
Yeah.
You know, at the start of the season, because it's all fine when Maeda and Kuhn are fit and well. One injury and you're having to then we had Jamesy as backup, so again you're okay. But that's all it takes, a couple of injuries, and then you're having to rely on the same guys who this time last season were blowing point week after week, we're blowing points. You know, if you remember, this was that same stage, and this was all we had then as well, or Mikey Johnson in addition. But it's been a concern, and I think we've not got away with it. That's harsh to say that. We've, you know, between the squad management, Kuhn being brilliant, Maeda, but we've not had those injuries. We've not had that yet. We've been quite fortunate this season, and the worry was injuries to either Kyogo or Ida or one of your wide players suddenly leaves you exposed. And I'd be intrigued to know what Yang's numbers are, because you're right, he's played a lot of, he's not started a lot of games, but he's featured in a lot of games now. I didn't know that stat, that he's featured more than Kuhn. And I couldn't tell you, maybe 1 or 2 goals and probably less than 5 assists. I don't know, something along those lines, I'd imagine, because it's just not good enough for a wide player. For all we slate Palmer, when he was on form last season, he had decent numbers. Yang's just never came close to reaching those numbers. And he's looked good in wee spells when he comes on, but yesterday's when you need it. Yesterday's when you've got the start, and we're without our star man, without James Forrest as well as the backup. That's your chance to show, right, I'm going to be the guy in the next few games. And just didn't do enough getting on the ball. And then when he did have it, wasteful. I think there's always, you want to give players a chance and time, and I think Nicholas Kuhn's a great example of where that needs to be done. Same with Bernardo, but this is now over a year. I think there's enough of a sample size now to say I don't think he's going to be a contributor.
I agree with you. It's not knee-jerk, Acsom. It's not, a few games in. It's not the similar scenario that we have with Engels, whereby I think he's been harshly treated by some. It's a case of saying, look, I've seen enough. You've been at the football club for 18 months now. You've had plenty of time, plenty of games, and this is the occasion, going into a game like yesterday, where it's like, by hook or by crook, let's win this game. Mm-hmm. Somebody dig in, create a chance, moment of magic, get the goal and down the road. And those 2 players, I do not trust that they're going to ever be able to do that. I really don't. So nothing personal and all this kind of stuff, but it leads us on. Scott Mason, you're right. Can we get Kuhn back for Christmas, please? All I want for Christmas is Nicholas Kuhn, home or away. David Cooper then brings up something that you touched on. Bring back Jota, he's a winner with us, right? The minute you mention a player that used to play with a football club, Acsom, people are rolling their eyes. There's the Kieran Tierney-Clarkson. All right, okay, we're now going to start out with Jota. And what I'm going to ask you is, why is this statement not actually taken seriously? We know what he can do, right? His career has gone off-piste, has gone off the rails. We can't blame him because of the money that was on offer. Celtic were happy to take the deal. But he has not performed. And it's a shame, because he was a player who was absolutely flying for Celtic. He came in under Ange Postecoglou, wins a double on loan, he wins a treble as a permanent player, and then we sell him. Unfinished business, yes. People say, oh, you never come back. Well, that's just a cliche. Yeah. That's all that is a cliche, right? Is Jota better than the 2 aforementioned wingers that we've discussed today? Yes, absolutely. Would Jota push for a jersey with Kuhn and Maeda? 100% yes. So why don't we have this serious conversation about it?
From a Celtic point of view, it's not even up for debate. Does he strengthen our squad 100%? As you said, does he probably come straight into your first team? Yes. Well, yeah, that's debatable because people will be like, "Oh, Kun Maeda," but yeah, I don't think people should forget just how good this guy was for us. And I don't know what's his actual situation at Rennes. Has he been featuring? Do you know? I'm not sure if he's actually played much or
I'll
just
have a
out
wee
of
look.
favour.
I'll have a wee look just while you're
I think
discussing.
the issue will be whether financially we can do it. Jota has obviously went to Saudi and then didn't work out, and then he's gone to a top five league, so he's now got that under his belt playing for a kind of decentish team in France. Now, if that's not worked out either, you wonder where's his next move. I think after Saudi, it was a bit unrealistic because he would have had loads of other options, and he's ended up in France. At this stage now, you're looking at it. If he's leaving Rennes, what's his next kind of options? What's the list of clubs that would be interested? Would we appeal to him? I think so. I think it will be more of a financial thing. If it could happen or not, it's an area that we desperately need to strengthen. It makes sense from I think the player point of view and the club point of view. It's just whether financially it could work. And obviously there's all the chat about Tierney as well. So you could be getting a full reunion of players coming back, but. Straight away, that just makes our left side stronger. Straight away, if you add the two of them in January, you
Oh,
know,
I mean, the prospect of that, Asim, seriously, the prospect of that is tantalising. That's what it is.
yeah,
You asked if he was playing. Since he had actually gone to Rennes, he's made 10 appearances, but 7 of them have been substitute appearances. So
right.
three starts, and those 3 starts were kind of in the middle. So at this moment in time, he's on the bench, either not getting on or he's getting 14 minutes, 15, 18, and just at the weekend there against Bordeaux, he gets 30.
Well, that's
30 minutes.
that's like a year and a half now where he's clearly not really enjoying his football. He's not had a good time of it from a career point of view, from a guy who, you're given his personality and what he was like on the pitch. He thrives in the whole charisma and being an entertainer. You heard it before he joined us. What does he enjoy? Is making fans smile. So he's as much as the bank balance has been brilliant for him in the last 18 months or so. From a football point of view, and given the kind of personality he is, he can't be enjoying that. So it might be at that point where he's like, I want to get back to enjoying playing football. I want to play in front of an adoring fan base. It makes sense again, like I say, from his point of view to be interested in that kind of deal if we could make it happen. As I say, it's a financial aspect, but also from our point of view, we need a winger. We need a creative winger. Well, we know fine well what he can produce.
It's scary actually when you consider him and Tierney. I mean, Tierney has been linked. Jota really hasn't been linked. It's just fans kind of looking at that. But when you rewind to last season's signings in the summer, we did bring in Marco Tilio for $1.5 million. We brought in Yang for 2.1. That's quite an outlay for a player who we keep going on about. Oh, you've got to give him time. 2.1 for him, 1.5 for Tilio. And then Lewis Palmer cost £3.5 million. Nicholas Kuhn obviously came in a wee bit later and is a first pick, so we don't have to worry about how much he cost us. But £3.5 million, right? So that's 5.6. That's £7 million for Tilio, Yang, and Palmer. £7 million is what Rennes paid for Jota. Now, I know that in terms of wages, has dropped from the Saudi wages to what he's making in France. God only knows what he's making there. But I'll tell you something: if you combine the 3 lots of wages that we're playing for Yang, Palmer, and Tilio, then you're somewhere in the mix. Even if it was 12 grand each. So deals can be done. Deals can be done. And by the way, I absolutely get it when people come in and say, ask him, no, let's find the next Jota. Let's stop going backwards. I get that. But if he's available and we know that he can slot right in and a deal can be done, I'd do it.
And I think there's a difference between that argument when you're like the Tierney one. I can see that argument holding a bit more substance with because it's been how long has that been since Tierney's away? 5 years more, whatever. He's obviously struggled a lot with injury. He's older now, so that's different. Jota was here, 15, 16 months ago, and was producing at a high level. He's still in the prime of his career. He's obviously going to take a bit of time maybe to get back to playing regularly and that kind of standards, but it's not one of those where you're like, oh, it's not going to be as good second time round. I wouldn't fear that with someone like Jota. So he's young enough. He's probably still hungry enough. He'll be probably itching to get back to, because he must miss it. He must. You can't play 26 games. I think I seen in the comments there that he's played in total since he's left us. That's no way to, for a guy who was in the prime of his career. I'd like to think that we'd be asking the question, but even just in general, that's the kind of quality and standard that we should be looking at now to try and strengthen our hand in January, because we've got so many different things to look forward to. We're top of we're well clear in the league. We're going to have the Scottish Cup, and then we've got the Champions League still, and we've got high hopes to try and make the next stage of that. So then you've still got, and I think we spoke about this before, but just remind me, I don't know if you'll know on the top of your head, but anyone that we sign, can they play? They can play in the playoff, but they can't play in the young boys in the Villa game. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a window of 3 days that after the current run of fixtures are over, you can bring in players that will then be eligible for the playoffs,
Right?
If you're lucky enough to get into the latter stages.
So obviously we've got aspirations to make the playoff, and again, that should be something that we should be using as try to entice players to come, and using for our own ambition. That okay, you never know, try and get that playoff spot. You never know, you might have a kind draw. There's a whole host of teams we could still play. Let's really go for it, and let's really address these issues. And it's not only for this season; it's so that we're looking ahead to summer again. We're going to have qualifiers potentially, but you want to get like Sakun. We've seen that took him a bit of time to adapt. Get your business done, and I know they always say January is a tough time to do it, but get your left back in, get your winger in, get your striker in, and so that you've got that solid foundation for the second half of the season.
Yeah, and again, this is a big thing. It's not a hard sell, is it? You go to Jota, right? Take him to the Brazen Head for a wee pint of the Guinness. Put your arm around them and say, listen, Champions League football, son.
Yeah.
The adoring fans are waiting for you. Yeah, I mean, listen, it might be fairy tale stuff, but this is a club built on fairy tales, isn't it? I mean, and there's a fairy tale about this club. Alan Robertson, great to see you and others popping up in the chat. Yes, we're still here on the 23rd of December. Do we take a day off? No. The Acsom guys might be able to take a day off for some turkey and opening presents. We'll do something for Christmas Day and New Year's Day. It'll be pre-recorded so that I can sit with my smoking jacket, my pipe, my slippers on Christmas Day, and you can still enjoy some Acsom at 12:30. Massive amount of work has happened in 2024. A lot of the stuff you won't have seen, but the fruits of the labour hopefully will be experienced in 2025. There's lots of things coming your way. So get involved in what this thing is that we call Acsom. Big plans for this is Acsom, big plans for this bulletin, for the blog, and for live events and everything else that's happening. Be part of it. Subscribe to the channel. Come along and see us. We do usually monthly live events where you can come and have a bit of a laugh at us and wind up Double Denim for his Double Denim and things like that. And everybody else that you might be able to bump into. You can see guys like Jim Orr, the Oracle, Acsom in the flesh if you come to one of our live events. If you are,
I was gutted I missed the one last week. What a lineup that was! Roy Aitken, Packy Bonner. That's Peter Grant. That's for certain people of a certain age. They were a bit before my time, but you hear so many people talk about that being the centenary team, being their favourite team, and all the kind of memories, and just such a relatable group of guys. So yeah, gutted that I missed it, but by all accounts, a fantastic night again.
It's a pinch yourself kind of moment every time. I said never ever take for granted the fact that what we did, obviously, because these guys are all they're not all from Glasgow. Big Roy has to travel to come to these things. And so we decide, right, you're going to meet in this place in Glasgow. You're going to have a wee bite to eat and a few drinks and we'll come and pick you up. And then you've got that journey. It might only be 10, 15 minutes from that chosen restaurant to the venue where you're sitting in a motor with these guys, as I'm thinking to yourself, this is wild. It is absolutely surreal that they're all winding each other up, winding you up, winding the driver up. Brilliant. Love it. Love every single bit of it. The chemistry between the guys, the friendships between them, they start talking about Frank McGarvey, they start talking about Tommy Burns, and they start talking about Billy McNeil. Actually, what came to mind yesterday when I was thinking about the night was the Centenary boys. There is a special bond. And obviously, when Big Billy started getting pretty ill, they decided, obviously having spoken to Billy McNeil's wife, that they would go and visit him every now and again and take him for a wee pot of tea and a catch up. And it really did help Acsom, that familiarity when he's at that stage of Alzheimer's, etc. And it was really hard for the family and a wee bit of respite for them. And they would take them out. And there was this particular day where he never really spoke. He never spoke this day. And all the guys are going through the stories to try and get reactions and all having a laugh. And just as they were leaving, he pulled on Andy Walker. He pulled on Andy Walker's arm, and Andy turns around and goes, "What is it, Gaffer? What is it, boss?" He goes, "Packy Bonner, hopeless." And that's all he said all day. And Big Pat told that story, and he loved the fact that the big man said that. It was brilliant. And this is the kind of stuff you get from the players. I love it. David Boyle, I get it was one game, changes, etc. However, the performances, this is going back to what you said earlier, have been coming. Midfield are not productive enough. I would be moving Calmac up for Endeavour and play Baye, who seems to have disappeared from view. We need to hit the byline. Right, this leads us on to the midfield then, right? And this is an area of the park that I think largely we've been pretty happy with this season. I think there's 5 vying for 3 jerseys. Right, I was looking at some stats. Probably surprised myself, actually, with this one. Luke McCowan lost the ball 23 times. 23 times in 62 minutes. Yeah. Oof. Now, I think someone dug these out on here. Let's see if they have been mentioned. No. Maybe I thought I was a bit hard, giving him a hard time.
I know he was a bit loose a few times, but I wouldn't have thought it was as much as that.
That's a worry. That's a worry. Because Luke McCowan has had one of these kind of like trajectories since he came to Celtic, Acsom, where very little criticism has come his way. And I think yesterday that I felt a wee bit of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Look, and I think we can't jump on him. It was one game where he's, like you said, every other appearance he's had has been full of glowing praise. So I think anytime we drop points, everyone's getting scrutinised, isn't it? It's one of those things now. You look at, we've only dropped points twice this season. And the other one was the Aberdeen game, and there was a fallout after that as well. If you remember, like we blew a 2-goal lead. But I think there was the yesterday's one. I wrote afterwards that I felt those drop points were coming, because of the last few away games in particular. It's felt a wee bit. The Kilmarnock game wasn't great away from home, and the first half at Tynecastle, Pittodrie, and then Zagreb, and yesterday as well. So, but with McCowan, I think he'll be fine. I still feel like he's, even though when it didn't come off, I still feel he's one that tries things on the half turn, and there was a couple of nice wee touches, and I thought he started the game pretty lively, and then just gradually he was getting a bit more loose in possession. But I've got no concerns with McCowan. I wouldn't mind him actually starting again on Thursday. I just feel like right now, for me, we need that creative spark, and I just don't think Engels is producing it in terms of creativity. And I think we might need to kind of get used to the fact that that's not his game. And I think maybe we all kind of thought Engels is going to come in and be the Matt O'Reilly replacement, completely different type of player. And I'm sure Rodgers probably knew that when he's buying him, so it's not like he'll be concerned. It's probably a lot of fans that are watching it and thinking this guy's not Matt O'Reilly. I don't think that's the kind of fit and profile of player he's going to be. I think he'll learn and develop different attributes, but he's not used to playing in a possession heavy team. Firstly, you look at what he was used to playing at for Augsburg, it was completely different. So I think he's taken a bit of adaptation. But I'm hoping that McCowan starts again. I feel like he needs maybe not a run of games, but I feel like he's due another start. I hope that's not him back out the team. And I think Bernardo played obviously in Zagreb, played the cup final, and then was back out yesterday. But I still feel, for me, he's probably our most informed midfielder. He's the most consistent this season. And obviously McGregor for me still starts. I know some people have got an issue with McGregor recently and think his form needs addressed, and he's not been at his best, but I still have him in there. So for me, that would be my midfield 3 on Wednesday. I'd maybe give Rio a wee rest, because I feel like Rio's played the most if you think about it, the rest have all kind of shuffled about. I feel like Rio played 120 minutes last week. He played it, started in Zagreb, started yesterday. So I feel like we can maybe mix it up there.
When we're talking about creativity, Bernardo, when he was being interviewed once he came into the club for a second time on a permanent basis, he was at pains to stress that he's a creative player. He's a guy that wants to get goals and assists, etc. And I think that what we had seen up to that point is a lot of his attributes were in a defensive sense. He was breaking up play. He wasn't playing a lot of balls forward. I remember Alan Morrison pointing that out as him. But I do think that he does have creativity. It's not as obvious.
It's a different kind, yeah.
Yeah, and he's maybe not got the flair element of that. Hatate, some of the stuff he can do is incredible. But I agree with you. I would bring in Bernardo, and I would bring in. See the thing with McKeown, if we were to bring back Engels, right, and keep him in the team, right, because I'm now thinking, right, we've got 2 games in between now and the Rangers game. And what we need to try and do is we need to try and find a system that's actually going to work at Ibrox.
Yes.
And we've got 2 games to find that system. Is Engels part of that system? Acsom. I mean, because obviously he was brought to the club to be part of it, and it's not quite worked out that way yet.
It's mad when you think about it, though, isn't it? Like, you've got £20 million worth of players that probably don't get into your starting team at the moment. The team that he went with in the cup final and in Zagreb is what I think Rodgers thinks his strongest team is and was going into those games, which was Bernardo, Hatate, and Callum. Ibrox is going to be a tough game, by the way. It's a game that you really don't want to go in and lose. They're going to be confident for it, but it's where we thrive often in these kind of fixtures where everyone's expecting them to come back and bring the deficit down. I would probably still start Bernardo over Engels. It might be, you're right, there might be an argument for Engels over Rio if he's wanting to play it a bit more pragmatic and have a bit more of athleticism in that midfield, but you lose a lot of creativity then again, like we've been speaking about. It's an interesting dilemma to have right now. The problem is, not the problem, but the difference is a few weeks ago everyone was playing well within that midfield and it was a hard decision in terms of they're all playing really well. Right now nobody's really staking their claim. Engels isn't having the impact that he would have liked. Rio's been a bit off it. Nobody's really cementing that place right now to say this is us. So maybe these next 2 home games could be that. But I don't know if Rodgers has decided yet. I think he'll see how the next couple of games pans out.
Yeah, and give them all minutes and try and get them all back up to speed. Absolutely. Rio Rodgers, great to see you commenting on the old X. Rio looks really young in there, doesn't he? He looks like a youngster. We peaked versus Leipzig. Probably so far, I would agree with that. But I think what it shows you as well, it gives you an insight into what we're capable of. And I think there's going to be moments this season where we see that again. We are going to see it again. We've not become a bad side overnight.
No.
Listen, the self-belief is there. There's nothing happened that's going to remove the self-belief that we have since Aberdeen and Leipzig, the 6-0 and 3-1 games. I mean, the trouncing that we got from Dortmund was before that. So we have the belief, we have the ability, the personnel are there. IH Decorating, welcome back to the show. You're commenting on the YouTube. Hatate needs to come out of the starting team. We were just talking about that. Gets away with game after game of being rotten. Bring him on for the last 25 when teams are tired. He hasn't got what it takes to make Celtic tick every week. See, right now, I'd agree with you. I think that's maybe something that Rodgers will consider. I wouldn't write him off. I think he's a talented player. And by the way, he's turned Rodgers around a wee bit. Remember, Rodgers didn't fancy him. I mean, he never spoke about it at the time because he's not like that. But, further down the line, he speaks about the fact that Rio wasn't his first choice and he had to do things differently and all this. Well, he's obviously doing things differently, Acsom, because he does, like you say, he does get the nod from Rodgers. And I do think that Rodgers...
And he finishes all of these games as well now. He's not your first sub. Used to be a point where 60, 70 minutes, Rio's the one coming off. Now it's Bernardo usually when he starts, or one of the other ones. So Rodgers obviously has that trust in him now. And Rio peaked at the same time. There's probably no coincidence. What was our 2 best performances? Aberdeen and Leipzig. What was Rio's probably 2 best performances? Aberdeen and Leipzig. So you could argue that when Rio's on that form, he makes Celtic tick, or, along with everyone else. But he needs to just produce that more consistently. And I think that's been his issue in his time. He's just not been able to do it to the consistency levels that Matt O'Reilly did last season over the course of the full season, and near enough. And I think that's what we were hoping this would be the breakthrough one for Rio to do that. He still could. He still can. Look. We don't want to kind of make it seem like this is a kind of downbeat, because you're right. We've spoke about the concerns given the kind of recent run of games and just. But like you said at the start, there's no need to panic. There's no need to be overly worried. We're still in a very good position. Again, you've just got real trust in the manager. He seems relaxed. He seems like he's not concerned. And I think we've got a good couple of games. It's the right couple of games now, I think, to try and get us winning again and winning comfortably, hopefully. I think a lot of it for me is just the speed of play. I think that's the thing. I think when we're playing the ball really quick and taking risks is when we've been at our best this season. It's when, obviously, up against a low block, which a lot of these teams are adopting against us, and we're maybe taking that extra one or two touches to play the pass straight to feet or safe pass. That's when it becomes a bit more predictable. And then you add to that, you're missing a couple of your creative sparks. Then it's natural you're going to get games like tomorrow, and usually one of those chances goes in, and you're walking away with another 1-0 victory. But I hope that we see a kind of injection of urgency on Thursday.
Yeah, no, you're right. That are the two fixtures coming up, of course. We talk about Thursday. Some people call it Boxing Day. We just call it Celtic v Motherwell. And then we've got the 29th of December on the Sunday, Celtic versus St Johnstone. Both games at home. Both games kicking off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'll cover both of them as we always do. And then we've got one eye on the 2nd of January, the traditional New Year's Day game, but it's on the 2nd, as you know, and it's at Ibrox, and there'll be no Celtic fans at the game. So, yeah, we've got 2 games to sort out any of the issues that Brendan Rodgers thinks that we have. Let us know about your talking points so far up to this point in the comment section. Should Celtic seriously look at Jota? And we've already done the Kieran Tierney story to death, but let us know how tantalising the left-hand side of the park would seem with those two on it. Jungle Lion, always a pleasure to see you coming in. Tell you what panic is. Being 9 points behind, knowing Celtic have to click into gear yet. Now, that's panic. Now, I'm bringing it up because I think that in terms of this thing that they call the narrative that's being spun, and that there's, the gap, it's getting tighter and all this nonsense, right? It's like Google Earth and zooming into one set of fixtures. Let's zoom back out for a minute. Let's look at that bigger picture just for a wee second. And when I'm looking at it and we talk about periods of domination, Acsom, it's not with a view of, look at us, we're triumphalists and all this kind of stuff. It's basically just to look at the bigger picture. And I mentioned in relation to the generation of success, I mentioned it the other day for anyone who missed it, because 25 years of success is what we're talking about. We're about to move into 2025, and Martin O'Neill joined us in 2000. And since then, on the park, we've had a generation of success. We won our first treble since the 1960s under Martin O'Neill. And you know what? That 25 years of success has flipped the mindset of the other set of football fans. And I'm talking obviously about the Rangers fans, because now they're clutching on to other things that does not actually exist. They do not actually exist on the football park. So things like the same club myth, we know that. We won't even go into that, right? And the corruption now within Scottish football, I see, that's the latest one. There's corruption within Scottish game and all this kind of nonsense, right? Now, the difference here between them being in that position and Celtic being in a position way back, and I'm going to take us back to 1992, the difference is that we looked within. And it goes back to something you mentioned earlier in the show, right? In 1992, Celtic were 25 years away from having won the European Cup. We were the architects of our own demise. We were the reason we were in such a rubbish position. We had a terrible stadium, a terrible board, and a terrible team, right? The only thing that kept us going was the fans. And around about that time, through the pages of the Not The View, fanzine mainly, but fanzines generally, asking Celtic supporters realised where we were in the food chain, realised that things had to change. We didn't stick our heads in the sand. And lo and behold, things did change. But we were introspective. We looked inside of the football club and said, where are the problems? that we have. Why have we gone from being a European Cup winner to this 1992? And I'm not going to name the players that were on the park, but we were really, really poor. And anybody in the comment section will appreciate that. Well, this is 25 years of domination, and there's 25 years of a Rangers fan base looking at the football club. And what do? They wheel out John Brown to come in and say, we always done them. Bomber Brown and the Radids. Seriously. So what they're going to have to look forward to in the future isn't very much, because they're never going to look inside. They're not going to say, right, what are we doing wrong here? What they're looking at is all these other aspects of the game. Oh, it's corruption in Scottish football. That's what it is. Oh, you put us down to the bottom tier of Scottish football. All this nonsense, right? So I have no fears about the gap and what the gap is. Yeah, at the top of the table, it's 9 points, but the gap is so much wider than that. I see in the great scheme of things, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's often fueled by the mainstream media as well. You know, there were points in this season where you did feel they were actually looking inwards, or, you know, at least attempting to, in terms of they weren't happy with what's going on in the boardroom and whatnot. But as soon as they've had an excuse to pounce on something else this last week, they forget all that. They forget all the fact that, you know, how bad they've been this season, how badly run they are, all their internal issues, the manager that they've been wanting out all season, you know, the squad that's really poor. They forgot all that and just pounced on, oh, you've cheated. And then it's been fueled by the media and by their own puppets. And you know what? I'm here for it, because, like we kept saying, that's the difference. As a fan base, as a club, we do hold the club to task when we feel it's needed. You know, people call it entitlement. Absolutely not. It's just when we see things going a certain way, we'll call it out, and we'll not. You know, we'll not just be cheerleaders. We'll actually. People talk about the COVID season. You know, everyone will have their own views on it, but we weren't happy with what was going on, and we want to change. And that's been throughout my time supporting Celtic. That yes, obviously you enjoy and you never take for granted the good times, and you accept there'll be seasons where things don't go your way. But when it's self-inflicted, i.e. the COVID season, some of it felt like we were just not, you know, making the right decisions at the right time. Then we look inwards and we try and we'll make our points heard, and I think that's the way to do it. But you're right, for them, it's find every single excuse they can, find everyone else to blame that they can, and the longer they keep doing that, the bigger the gap becomes. So that's why for us, we just kind of laugh it off. It does become sometimes annoying, just because, yeah, look, I know you mentioned you don't really kind of listen to your from where you're from, so the kind of super scoreboard and stuff, but that's normally when I'm kind of driving about and I've got it on, so I do listen to it, and you're just like, you know what? Sometimes it's just fueled by some of the pundits that they have on, and your Neil McCann's on Sports Scene and all these kind of guys, and you're just like, surely they can get better, more balanced people on than these.
I'd rather have people that challenged it, Acsom, rather than cheerleaded a narrative.
Look at Chris Sutton, for example. You know, and I don't agree with everything he says or does. There were points in the past where I felt he was selective, you know, in terms of when he chose to criticise and who he chose to criticise, mainly the kind of Ronnie Dyla times, and then the comparison between Neil Lennon. But then eventually he went for Neil Lennon as well, which obviously Neil wasn't happy about. But, you know, Sutton calls it out. Sutton says it how it is. Yes, he likes to have a joke and a laugh and a bit of banter at the other mob's expense, but
excuse me,
he'll call out Celtic when they need to be called out, and that's what you want.
You do, in a balanced way, and I think he does it in a balanced way, and hopefully we do as well. Donny, Tiny Hands, you're in 9 clear at Christmas with the League Cup 1 is a great start. And let's not forget what we've done in the Champions League, Donny. Brian Forbes, if Jers win at Ibrox, only 6 points behind. This is what I'm talking about, Brian. No big ifs and buts and all the rest of it. Just look after what we're doing, and we will be absolutely fine at Ibrox. Because you could say, you know, 3 defeats between now and the end of the season and it's 0 points. How about we just continue to build on the good form and the momentum? And I don't see it having come to a standstill. I look at the weekend's game there and I think, you know what? If you're going to lose Austin Trusty, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Alistair Johnson and Nicholas Kuhn, you're going to find it hard, right? You're going to find it hard to just click into the same rhythm and style of play and blow a team away. And if you are getting to that stage, then absolutely you've got a squad there, I think, of 17 or 18 players, every single one of whom can step into the first team berth. I don't think we're quite there yet.
And I also think the last season will be fresh in the players and the managers' kind of memory as well. You know, we blew quite a healthy lead last year. I don't think they'll allow that kind of complacency or drop in form to happen again. I think that yesterday will be, you know, frustrating for a lot of the players, and they'll want to kind of rectify that these next few games and make sure that we go to Ibrox and still 9 clear. Worst case, they've got a couple of tough away games coming up, but I just don't see that drop off continuing. As much as it's been a bit of a concern, we've managed to pick up wins, managed to pick up a trophy in a good position in the Champions League. I don't see that kind of continuation where we'll have like a run of drop points. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that hopefully Thursday night we'll be back on in a much more kind of optimistic mood again.
No, without a doubt. Listen, thank you every single one of you for getting involved. It is Christmas week. We'll be back tomorrow at the usual time, and we'll even throw something out for you on Christmas Day as well. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Remember to give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to YouTube, free of charge. And thank you once again to Acsom Rabbani for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers.